Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're looking at a really, I don't know, like fascinating but also really tragic case.
Yeah.
It's the case of Magda from Sosnowiec, Poland.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the controversial case of her mother, Katarzyna Waśniewska.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with, transcripts from two YouTube videos, one of which is like an interview with Detective
Right.
Krzysztof Rutkowski, who was actually involved in the case.
Okay.
And another one that's kind of just like analyzing Catherine's life leading up to everything.
Right.
So obviously, given, the sensitive nature of this, we're going to approach this with respect.
Of course, yeah.
And really just try to understand the facts and the complexities of the case, not try to like sensationalize anything.
Absolutely. It's important to, treat this with the sensitivity it deserves. And, we're just looking at the information that's presented and analyzing that.
Yeah. So let's start with Catherine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was she, like, before all of this unfolded?
Well, I mean, she was born in 1990. And, she had a difficult childhood, grew up in kind of poverty. Her father was an alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
So not an easy start to life. But despite that, she was a good student. She actually was accepted into a prestigious high school.
Okay.
But then kind of abruptly just stopped attending, never graduated. And the reasons for that are kind of unclear.
So a little bit of a mysterious, kind of start to her life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some missing pieces there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the sources mention that she found some solace in religion.
Yeah, she got involved in her local church. She joined a youth group, and she was seen as very pious. Like, some people really admired her devotion.
Yeah.
Others thought maybe it was a little, a little performative. Like, she liked the attention, maybe wasn't as genuine as it seemed.
So it kind of seems like even as a youth, she was a bit of a contradictory, complex character.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So what about her relationship with Bartek? This is her future husband. How did that all start?
Well, they met in a bar, and it's interesting. Catherine was the one who was, pursuing him very actively. And like Catherine, he also had a troubled background. His father was an alcoholic, too.
Okay, so they had that in common.
Yeah, and, that shared experience might have drawn them to each other, but maybe it also masked, deeper issues in their relationship,
Yeah.
It's difficult, right? When you bond over trauma, sometimes it's not always the healthiest foundation.
Definitely. Trauma bonding is a real thing, but it doesn't necessarily make for a healthy long-term relationship.
Exactly.
Okay, so the relationship moved pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, very quickly. She got pregnant unexpectedly, and they ended up having a civil marriage ceremony when she was already 5 months pregnant.
So a whirlwind romance, and I guess, shotgun wedding, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Sounds like a complicated dynamic was already in place.
Yeah, and it just got more complex, when with the birth of their daughter, Magda.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Like, Magda arrives.
Yeah.
What did the sources tell us about the birth and Catherine's early, experience as a mother?
Well, Magda was actually born prematurely via C-section.
Oh, wow.
And she required intensive care.
Oh, no.
And this raised some concerns about Catherine's smoking habits during the pregnancy.
Oh, so she continued to smoke even while pregnant?
Oh, yeah, and even after Magda was born, too.
Okay.
And her postpartum recovery was also difficult, probably due to complications from the C-section.
That's just a lot to deal with. Did these challenges affect her relationship with Magda?
It seems like it did. There were conflicts with Bartek's family about childcare. And Catherine she seemed to struggle to bond with Magda. There's even an anecdote where she refused to talk to Magda, claiming that, she was a baby, wouldn't understand anyway.
Oh my gosh, that's chilling. Like that's a little bit of a red flag,
Yeah, it definitely suggests a disconnect there.
Yeah, for sure.
And it seems like this period, like early motherhood, was really a turning point in the story. Because a lot of her behaviors, like avoiding childcare, reacting kind of volatilely to any kind of criticism.
Right.
And the struggle to bond with Magda, they all kind of foreshadow the tragic events that were to come.
So the signs were there, even though obviously nobody could have predicted what would happen.
Right.
Okay, so let's move on to, kind of what brought this whole case into the public eye, which was the alleged kidnapping of Magda.
Right. So on January 24, 2012, Catherine reported that Magda had been abducted.
Okay.
While she was taking her to her mother's house. And this, of course, triggered a massive search.
I mean, I remember this. This was international headline. This was a huge deal.
Yeah, huge. Everyone was following it. The public was very sympathetic to Catherine at first. The media was all over it.
But wasn't there something, like, off about her story from the beginning?
Yeah, there were inconsistencies in the details she gave, about the abduction, and her behavior was getting really erratic, and then she even refused to take a polygraph test.
Really?
Yeah, when Detective Krzysztof Rutkowski got involved, he suggested it, and she just flat out refused.
That's interesting. Now, Rutkowski, he's a fascinating character. He was a former detective, but, like, controversial, right?
Yeah, very controversial. He had lost his detective license, and he was known for using the media to put pressure on suspects.
Okay. So he's already a big personality when he enters the scene.
Oh, yeah. He added a whole other layer of complexity to what was already a complicated case.
Yeah. So how did he approach this investigation, and what kind of impact did he have?
Well, he definitely used the media attention, to his advantage,
Right.
to put pressure on Catherine. And eventually, this led to kind of a staged confrontation where she finally confessed that she had made the whole kidnapping up.
Wow. What a twist. What happened next?
Well, things took an even darker turn, unfortunately. Magda's body was found, but it wasn't where Catherine had initially said it would be.
Oh, no.
It was hidden 2 kilometers away,
Wow.
which obviously raised even more doubts about her story.
I can't imagine the shock and betrayal the public must felt when this started to unravel.
Oh, yeah.
So how did she react once, her lies were exposed?
It's strange. Her behavior was very baffling. She didn't seem to show remorse or distress. She was very detached, emotionless.
Really?
Yeah, there was one detail in the source that said she was calmly stirring sugar into her tea during an interview.
Oh.
Completely unfazed by the gravity of the situation.
Wow. That's just, unsettling to hear, that she's so calm and collected after everything that's come to light. So did she offer any explanation for her actions or what had happened to Magda?
At first, she said that Magda's death was an accident. She said that the baby had fallen and hit her head.
Okay.
But later, forensic analysis actually contradicted that.
Really?
Yeah, it suggested that Magda had been suffocated intentionally.
Oh, wow.
And so at that point, the investigation shifted. It went from a possible tragic accident to a potential murder case.
So another huge turn in the story, right? What was the public reaction to this new information?
Oh, it was a complete 180. Remember, they were really sympathetic to Catherine at first.
Right.
But then it just outrage and disbelief. They felt totally betrayed, because of the lies and then this horrible revelation about, how Magda probably died.
And what about Bartek, her husband? How did he react to all this?
It's kind of unbelievable, but he actually continued to support her throughout the investigation.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, even with the mounting evidence and the public turning against her, he seemed to really believe her. He was clinging to this hope that it was all just a terrible misunderstanding.
Oh, man. That's heartbreaking to think that he held on to that belief for so long, only to have it shattered,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tragic element of this whole story. His unwavering loyalty, even when everything was pointing in a different direction, it adds another layer of sadness to it all.
Yeah, it does. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Rutkowski's methods, because we touched on them earlier, but they were pretty controversial, right? He got the confession, but a lot of people questioned how he did it.
Oh, yeah. His tactics were definitely controversial. He was operating outside of the, normal legal system, right?
Right.
Using the media to pressure her, those staged confrontations, it raises questions about, how far is too far, right? Was it ethical? Did it interfere with the police's investigation?
So there was tension between him and law enforcement.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The police felt like he was jeopardizing the case with all his media stunts. They saw him as kind of a vigilante, operating in this gray area of the law.
Right.
But, he did end up sharing information with the authorities, so maybe that helped in the end.
I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? He uncovered the truth, but the way he did it was, definitely questionable.
Exactly. It makes you think about that balance between, finding justice and doing it the right way.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so going back to Catherine, we've talked about her behavior being inconsistent, that lack of remorse. Did anyone try to understand what might be going on with her psychologically?
Yeah, some experts thought maybe she had a personality disorder or was experiencing some kind of disassociation.
Okay.
Like that might explain why she was so detached and able to, create these elaborate lies.
Right.
But, I mean, without a proper evaluation, it's all just speculation.
Yeah, of course. But it is fascinating, right? And disturbing to think how someone could do something so awful, but then seem so unaffected by it.
It really is. And it emphasizes how important it is to consider mental health in these types of cases. It's not always as simple as just labeling someone as a monster.
Right.
There might be something more going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, her past, right, we talked about her childhood, the rumors of possible sexual assault when she was in high school. That's a lot of trauma.
Yeah, and if that's true, it definitely adds another layer to this whole story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, trauma can have a huge impact on someone, the way they see the world, their behavior, their relationships.
And it sounds like, in Catherine's case, she never really dealt with any of it. She just, built this wall of lies around herself.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Instead of, confronting her pain, she created this whole web of deception, and it ended up destroying her life and tragically took her daughter's life, too.
It's a really sad thought. So this brings us to the trial and what happened after. What was the outcome for Catherine?
Well, the whole country was watching, right? Everybody wanted justice for Magda. And the prosecution, they presented all the evidence, like her inconsistent stories, the forensic analysis that proved it wasn't an accident, and just her overall strange behavior.
Right.
And in the end, the court found her guilty of premeditated murder.
Wow.
And sentenced her to 25 years in prison.
25 years. That's a long time. So they didn't buy the whole accident thing at all. And I guess whatever might have been going on with her mental health didn't really make a difference to the judge.
Yeah. I mean, the sentence shows just how serious they considered the crime, It was planned, it was calculated, and while they acknowledged that she had a tough past, they ultimately held her responsible for her actions and, the terrible consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a completely tragic ending to a really sad story. What about Bartek, though? Did he stick by her even after she was convicted?
No, actually he didn't. After the trial, it seems like, reality set in for him. He finally had to face what she had done.
Yeah.
So he separated from her, and he actually ended up writing a book called My Truth.
Oh, wow.
About the whole experience, his grief, the betrayal, and just that process of coming to terms with the truth about his wife.
God, it's another layer of heartbreak, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just Catherine and Magda who were affected. It was their families, the whole community.
Exactly. It really shows you how one person's actions can have these ripple effects that hurt so many people.
Yeah.
And in this case, the damage was it was irreversible.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, looking back on everything we've talked about, right? Her childhood, the relationship with Bartek, the fake kidnapping, everything. What do you think are the big takeaways, the things our listeners should really think about?
Well, I think this case really shows you that truth can be, really complicated. And sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah.
It also makes you realize how important it is to think critically about what you hear, what you see, especially in the media. Don't jump to conclusions,
Right.
Because behind every headline, there's a real human story with all its complexities.
Yeah. And maybe it also makes us think about mental health and how important it is to have support systems in place, especially for parents who are struggling.
Oh, absolutely. This case definitely raises questions about whether things could have been different, if there had been more support, more resources available. It's something we have to think about as a society.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a reminder that even in seemingly normal lives, there can be darkness hidden underneath. And sometimes the people closest to us are capable of doing the most unimaginable things.
This case definitely challenges our ideas about motherhood, about trust, about what we believe to be true. It's a story that sticks with you.
It really does. Well, thank you so much for taking us through this deep dive. It was definitely heavy at times, but really important to explore.
It was my pleasure. I hope our listeners, will keep thinking about these things.
Yeah, and to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Keep those minds curious. And remember, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.